Thought Force in Business and Everyday Life by William Walker Atkinson. Preface. In the interest of self-indication, I deem it prudent to articulate that this treatise has been compiled with a certain degree of precipitation from the memoranda utilized during my specific discourses, the instruction contained herein constituting, for all practical intents, the syllabi of the aforementioned lectures. Throughout the oral presentations, and within this volume, my singular and exclusive objective has been to familiarize the scholar with the methodologies for cultivating and effectively deploying the potent energies dormant within his being. Personal magnetism and psychic influence. Toward this result, I have relinquished all aspirations to literary flair and all endeavors to attain eloquence of diction. I perceived that I possessed a vital communication to impart, and I strove to disseminate it expeditiously, lucidly, and unambiguously, bereft of any ambition toward ornate composition. Should a pedestrian term appear to adequately articulate my conception, I employed it without hesitation. If a colloquialism or semi-vernacular phrase appeared apposite to the context, it was forthwith incorporated. I venture to hope that my critics will forego the exertion of highlighting my manifold deficiencies regarding style and composition. I am acutely cognizant of these imperfections. I have relegated all other considerations to a secondary tier in my striving to render this treatise intelligible and pragmatic. This serves as an elucidation, rather than an expression of contrition. With the aforementioned accord established between us, I proffer this modest volume for your benevolent perusal. While remaining thoroughly conscious of its shortcomings, I persist in the conviction that it shall prove beneficial to a portion of the multitude striving to surmount adverse environments, and that it may function as a navigational beacon, indicating the trajectory towards superior circumstances. I hold the sentiment that it shall contribute its due portion to the labor of expunging the ideology of fear from the intellects of men, and of supplanting the admission of inability with the assertion of capability and volition. I possess the conviction that it is destined to achieve these ends, for it encapsulates within its pages the embryonic seeds of a potent verity. Chicago, December 4, 1900. William Walker Atkinson. Chapter 1. Introduction to Scientific Practice. Theoretical constructs are but grand, iridescent bubbles, with which the mature scions of science amuse themselves. The preponderance of authors addressing this subject have dedicated nearly all their exertions, as well as their literary volume, to establishing, firstly, that personal magnetism veritably existed, and, secondly, that the phenomenon was best explained by some cherished hypothesis of their own devising. Certain commentators attribute the capacity for influencing men to the observance of a vegetarian regimen, notwithstanding the fact that some of the most magnetic individuals transform their stomachs into veritable sepulchres. Others maintain that the secret resides in celibacy and abstinence from sexual intercourse, notwithstanding the fact that the majority of magnetic individuals do not diverge in their sexual customs from their less magnetic brethren. Still others contend that magnetic force permeates the ambient atmosphere, and that, consequently, deep respiration permits one to absorb vast quantities of the vital fluid, thereby charging the self with force in the manner of an accumulator. And so the pattern continues, each proponent advocating their own trivial, favored hypothesis. Now, I possess no inclination to disparage the systems aforementioned. Although not a rigid vegetarian, I harbor sympathy for adherents of that persuasion. Although not leading a life of celibacy, I perceive significant merit in the doctrine of continence, and the virtues of chastity are beyond dispute. Furthermore, while I do not embrace the theory concerning the absorption of magnetic force from the terrestrial atmosphere, I remain a staunch advocate of and believer in deep respiration, convinced that were it universally practiced, much infirmity and physical debility would vanish from the globe. All these practices are beneficial, yet a modicum of reflection will demonstrate to any observer that they are not the primary factors in the production of the quality designated as personal magnetism. Authors on this subject typically conclude by informing their readership of the marvelous possibilities available to whosoever can acquire this power and master its application. They, however, articulate little or nothing regarding the method by which this force may be obtained, beyond the mere statement of their theories. They deliver discourses, yet they do not instruct. They are preachers rather than pedagogues. They dwell upon theoretical abstractions and neglect empirical facts. Genuine advancement in this branch of scientific inquiry has been achieved not by scribes or theorists, but by a select few earnest investigators who have conducted innumerable experiments, explored every avenue of intelligence, and extricated this wondrous subject from the realms of mere speculation to establish it upon a scientific foundation. The author has remained a diligent student and investigator of this subject for many years, and the present work constitutes an endeavor to impart to his students certain fundamental principles derived from the investigations and practical experiments conducted by himself and his colleagues in this field. Our lessons, therefore, shall be restricted, as far as is feasible, to statements of demonstrated fact and practical instruction, addressing theory only when absolutely essential. In my estimation, I would affront your intelligence were I to present an elaborate argument, the purpose of which would be an attempt to prove the existence of that wondrous force, latent within humanity, developed by the few yet attainable by all, that mysterious quality designated, for lack of a superior nomenclature, personal magnetism. To undertake a proof of its existence would be akin to an attempt to convince the average intelligent individual of the fact that the magnet influences the needle, that X-rays penetrate the human body or even denser objects, that a message may be conveyed via electricity along a beam of light, or indeed, by wireless telegraphy through the ether without the necessity of any additional medium. Every intelligent person is cognizant of the existence of the aforementioned phenomena and requires no demonstration thereof. If he possesses any interest in the subject, he desires instruction on how to manipulate these forces, that he may be capable of reproducing the experiments personally. This holds equally true for the student of personal magnetism. He has long since ascertained that such a force exists. He observes it in his daily environment and is aware of the wonders accomplished through its agency. He is, perhaps, aware that he has developed the force to a certain degree. Regardless, what he desires is to become acquainted with the means whereby he can fully cultivate and intelligently utilize the force latent within him. I, therefore, shall make no attempt to demonstrate the existence of this force, holding it to be self-evident. I also intend to eschew a tedious discussion of the numerous theories advanced to explain the phenomenon of personal magnetism. I possess no cherished hypothesis to promote. I shall endeavor to instruct you on how to obtain results. Subsequently, you may peruse the literature on theories, or possibly formulate a novel hypothesis of your own. I will state briefly my own conception of the cause underlying the phenomena alluded to in this work, yet I shall not attempt to impose my views upon you. You are at liberty to accept or reject any theory, as the outcome in no way depends upon any specific form of belief. Many who have achieved the most superior results have discarded one theory after another and now declare that they do not attempt to explain the true cause underlying the results, being content to proceed without a dogmatic theory, provided they understand how to secure the results. With this explanation, I shall depart the land of theory and enter the realm of practice, and will endeavor to so instruct you regarding the development and utilization of this mighty force that you may reproduce the results already obtained by others, and perhaps become investigators and pioneers in the work of blazing a trail through the thicket of superstition and mystery with which the subject has been enveloped for so long. I will ask you to accept nothing that you cannot substantiate. Chapter 2. Thought vibrations and mental radiations. To the general consensus of intellects, the designation personal magnetism suggests the concept of a current emanating from the person of the magnetic individual, attracting all those who reside within the circumference of his magnetic influence. Although this conception is substantially erroneous, it nevertheless retains within it the embryo of authentic truth. There exists, indeed, a stream of attractive energy radiating from the human form. However, it is not a magnetic force inasmuch as the term magnetism implies an association with the lodestone or with electricity. The human magnetic current, whilst exhibiting a certain resemblance to these two familiar forces regarding its effects, possesses no substantive correlation with them concerning its origin or intrinsic nature. That which we designate personal magnetism is the subtle stream of thought waves, or thought vibrations, projected from the human intellect. Every thought engendered by our minds constitutes a force of greater or lesser intensity, fluctuating in potency according to the impetus imparted to it at the moment of its inception. When we engage in cogitation, we emit a subtle current which traverses space like a ray of light, exerting influence upon the minds of others who are frequently separated from us by vast distances. A potent thought will proceed upon its mission charged with formidable power, often overcoming the inherent resistance of other minds to external impressions, whereas a feeble thought will prove unable to gain entry into the mental citadel of another, unless that fortress is negligently defended. Recurrent thoughts of a similar nature, transmitted consecutively, will often effect an entrance where a solitary thought wave, though significantly more robust, might be repulsed. It is a manifestation of a physical law within the psychical realm, and exemplifies the ancient adage regarding the steady dripping that erodes the stone. We are all affected, far more than we are cognizant, by the thoughts of others. I refer not to their stated opinions, but to their mental emanations. A distinguished authority on the subject accurately asserts, thoughts are things. Indeed, they are substantive entities, and exceedingly potent ones at that. Unless we comprehend this reality, we remain at the mercy of a formidable force, of whose nature we are ignorant, and whose very existence many of us repudiate. Conversely, if we comprehend the nature and laws governing this marvelous force, we may master it and render it our instrument and auxiliary. Every thought generated by us, whether feeble or robust, virtuous or malevolent, salutary or morbid, emits vibratory waves which influence, to a greater or lesser degree, all with whom we interact, or who may fall within the radius of our mental vibrations. Thought waves are analogous to the ripples upon a pond occasioned by the immersion of a pebble. They traverse in constantly widening circles, radiating from a central locus. Naturally, if an impulse projects the thought waves vigorously toward a specific objective, the impact will be experienced more intensely at that juncture. In addition to influencing others, Our thoughts affect our own selves not merely transiently but permanently. We are that which we think ourselves into being. The biblical assertion that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he, is literally accurate. We are all the products of our own mental fabrication. You are doubtless aware of the ease with which one may think oneself into a melancholic state, or the contrary, but you may not realize that repeated contemplation upon a specific trajectory will manifest not only in character, which it indubitably does, but also in the physical aspect of the thinker. This is a verifiable reality, and one need only observe one's surroundings to perceive it. You have likely noted how an individual's occupation manifests in his appearance and general demeanor. What, pray tell, do you suppose precipitates this phenomenon? It is nothing more nor less than thought itself. If you have ever altered your occupation, your general character and appearance corresponded with your modified patterns of thought. Your new vocation elicited a new sequence of ideation, and thoughts invariably take form in action. You may never have considered this perspective, yet it is nonetheless valid, and you may discover ample evidence of its accuracy merely by observing your environment. The individual who contemplates energy manifests energy. The man who contemplates courage manifests courage. The man who thinks I can and I will achieves his aim, whereas the man who thinks I cannot is left behind. You recognize this to be the truth. Now, what occasions this disparity? It is thought, fundamental quotidian thinking, and nothing more. Naturally, the action follows the thought. But why? Simply because it is inevitable. Action ensues as the natural consequence of vigorous cognition. You think earnestly and action completes the process. Thought is the supreme entity in the world. If you do not comprehend this now, you shall do so before you have concluded this course of instruction. You may assert that this is not a novel concept to you, claiming that you understood the resolution of the will and matters of that nature long ago. Then why did you not implement it and achieve personal distinction? I shall reveal the impediment. You thought I can't rather than I can. Now, I intend to transform that I can't into a substantial I can and a dominant I will. That is my purpose here, and I intend to reconstruct you before I conclude our interaction. I presume you anticipated that I would provide an elaborate transcendental discourse on ethereal matters, and hoped that I would instruct you on how to imbue yourself with sufficient magnetism to ignite the gas with your fingertips, or to attract everyone to you akin to a fragment of steel to a magnet. Did you not? Well, I shall not. Rather, I intend to instruct you on how you may cultivate within yourself a force compared to which magnetism is feeble, a force that will forge you into a person of substance, a force that will compel you to recognize the I am within you, a power that will enable you to become an individual of robust personal attributes, a person of influence and a successful being. I shall reveal how you may acquire that which you have been designating personal magnetism, provided you commence your efforts in earnest. It is worthy of your strife, and when you perceive your new strength developing within, you would not exchange your newly acquired knowledge for a fortune. Indeed, you feel a measure stronger already, do you not? Naturally, you do. I have never discoursed for 5 minutes to a class of students concerning I can and I will and the I am within them without witnessing them square their shoulders, elevate their heads, inhale deeply, and gaze directly into my eyes as a man or woman ought. It was thought manifesting itself in action. Do you perceive the significance? I had planted the seed of self-knowledge, and it had commenced its germination. Before I conclude this lesson, I wish to direct your attention to one other crucial aspect of thought, and that is the adductive power of thought. Heed this, if you please, as it is of the highest importance. Avoiding all attempts at a scientific explanation and eschewing technical nomenclature, I shall state the matter concisely thus. Thoughts attract kindred thoughts. Virtuous thoughts attract other virtuous thoughts. Malevolent thoughts attract the malevolent. Thoughts of strength do likewise. Thoughts of discouragement and doubt adhere to this principle, and so on through the entire spectrum of ideation. Your thought draws to itself the corresponding thought of others and augments your reservoir of that specific quality of thought. Do you grasp the implication? Entertain thoughts of fear, and you draw to yourself all the fearful ideation in that vicinity. The more intensely you dwell upon it, the greater the supply of undesirable thought that congregates upon you. Contemplate I am fearless, and all the courageous thought force within your radius will gravitate toward you and assist you. Attempt this. That is to say, attempt the latter. Refrain from harboring thoughts of fear. Are you aware that fear and its eldest progeny, worry, are the root cause of more misery, more unhappiness, and more failures than anything else in the world? Fear and hate are the progenitors of all nefarious thoughts. Although I intend to expound upon this subject with greater comprehensiveness in subsequent lessons, permit me to implore you at this immediate juncture, with the utmost earnestness I possess, to extirpate those abominable weeds. Fear and hate. Uproot them completely. They corrupt the entire garden and propagate legions of subsidiary weeds, such as worry, doubt, timidity, lack of self-respect, jealousy, spite, malice, envy, slander, and morbid ideas. It is not my intention to deliver a homily. Nevertheless, I am cognizant that these odious reflections are impeding your advancement, a reality you will inevitably perceive if you pause to reflect for but a moment. Unshutter the windows and allow the unadulterated radiance of bright, cheerful, and happy thoughts to permeate the interior. Subsequently, the pathogens of doubt, despair, and failure will depart to seek more congenial accommodations. If you were my most cherished intimate, and I held the knowledge that this communication would constitute my final utterance upon the terrestrial plane, I would declaim to you with the maximum intensity my vocal faculties could sustain. Relinquish all thoughts of fear and hate. Chapter 3. Attaining Success Through Mental Control. I direct this discourse to you under the premise that you harbor a desire to cultivate your internal latent forces for the express purpose of achieving success. Success in one's existence is materially contingent upon possessing the capacity to attract and influence one's fellow men. Regardless of whatever other attributes you may hold, you remain disadvantaged by the absence of that subtle power we are accustomed to designating as personal magnetism. Observe your surroundings, and you shall perceive that nearly every individual who has achieved prominence possesses the ability to attract, persuade, influence, or control his contemporaries. They are, without exception, recognized as strong men. There exist but a few exceptions to this great maxim, and these anomalies serve only to substantiate the rule itself. These exceptions are typically found among those who have demonstrated success within the realms of art, scientific research, invention, literary composition, and the like. It becomes readily apparent that their triumph, by the very nature of such pursuits, relies more upon close, concentrated, and assiduous research or exertion, rather than upon drive, energy, force, and understanding of human nature, or the aptitude for managing men. These individuals are successful in their respective spheres of endeavor, yet, as a rule, the fruits of their labor are garnered by others possessing a more worldly disposition. Should these tireless scholars encounter financial success, it is invariably because a more positive individual has assumed command of the commercial aspect of their work and propelled it forward, in which instance the said positive man usually appropriates the lion's share. This being the actual state of affairs, I am justified in defining success as the attainment of financial recompense, which must depend largely upon the personal magnetism of the aspirant. The inventor, student, author, and scientist may derive great benefit from comprehending the intelligent employment of the powers of mental control. However, to the man among men remains the privilege of securing the optimal results of that marvelous power, for it yields him not merely success, but also its material manifestations, money. Capital, regarded simply as currency, is not a lofty ideal. Yet, when viewed as the means of surrounding oneself with the finest elements of existence, it becomes a not unworthy objective for human endeavor. I, therefore, feel warranted in treating it as the end to be pursued. To reiterate, success in life is largely contingent upon our capacity to interest, attract, influence, and control our fellow men. I do not anticipate that you will require any disputation upon that point, provided you have possessed any acquaintance whatsoever with the world of men and affairs. The subsequent step is to ascertain how this wondrous and valuable power may be acquired. The answer is found in the mastery of the law of mental control. That constitutes the secret not only of personal magnetism but also of success in life and of happiness as well. To the gentleman or lady who masters this law, the world is an oyster to be opened and savored in comfort. Even he who lacks the diligence and perseverance to pursue the exercises for the development of his latent power shall become stronger and more positive from a mere acquaintance with the subject. This is all very well, you may argue, yet you demand to be informed how one may cultivate this power. That is precisely what I am presently doing. I am guiding you toward a comprehension of the theory through gradual stages. I desire the concept to unfold naturally, so as to avoid causing you mental dyspepsia. Now, permit a summation of the general theory before I address the subject in detail. I have informed you that the power of thought could be utilized in a variety of ways toward the objective of influencing men and achieving success. I have provided you with a conception of how thought operates in the aforementioned direction. Before proceeding to our next lesson, I deem it prudent to once again call your attention to the several distinct manners in which thought can aid you in attaining success through the influencing of men. Thought shall assist you in the following manner. By the utilization of your positive thought force in the direction of directly influencing men in person, through the law of suggestion. By this, I signify that you will be enabled to interest men in your schemes and plans, enlist their aid, secure their patronage, and influence them generally. This faculty, while natural to some, can be acquired by any individual who possesses the willpower and perseverance to cultivate it within themselves. Most students of the subject are desirous of acquiring knowledge of this branch of mental control prior to the other phases of the discipline, and I, therefore, shall address it in my subsequent lesson. By the power of direct thought vibrations set in motion by your mind, which will exert a potent effect upon the minds of others, unless they comprehend the secret of guarding against these forces and rendering themselves positive to others. An understanding of this law will also enable you to present a positive mental attitude toward the thought waves emanating from the minds of others. By the power of the adductive qualities of thought, which operates upon the theory that like attracts like. By constantly maintaining certain thoughts in your mind, you attract to yourself thoughts and influences of a similar nature from the great body of thought surrounding us, unseen yet all-powerful. This power is one of the most potent forces in nature, and if properly utilized, it will attract assistance from the most unexpected quarters. Thoughts are things, and they possess a wondrous power of attracting to themselves other thought waves of the same vibratory pitch and quality. By the power of thought in shaping your character and temperament to meet the requirements of your organization, you lack certain qualities requisite for your success. You are aware of this as well as, if not better than, anyone else. Yet you have been deluded by a belief that these shortcomings were an intrinsic part of you and that the leopard cannot change his spots. To you, the study of the law of mental control arrives as a mighty ally, for you can surmount these deficiencies and acquire new characteristics and qualities, as well as learn to strengthen those you already possess. I shall endeavor to start you upon the proper path through this series of lessons. I shall delineate the way for you, but you must perform the labor yourself. Every man must work out his own salvation in this study, as in every other branch of human endeavor. Chapter 4. Influencing the Active and Passive Mind. In this and the succeeding lesson, I shall endeavor to elucidate the process whereby an individual exerts dominion over his fellow men during a personal consultation, engages their interest in his stratagems and designs, enlists their aid and support, secures their patronage, and sways them generally. We are all cognizant of individuals who possess the capacity to achieve these results, and yet we content ourselves with marveling at their singular potency, without endeavoring to acquire it. The art of influencing men or women whilst we are in their immediate presence intrinsically encompasses the several other methods of mental influence mentioned in the preceding lessons, and partakes of the essence of each. It is arduous to discourse intelligibly regarding this phase of mental influence without encompassing the entire scope intended to be explained in subsequent lessons. I must satisfy myself with a cursory allusion to these several distinct branches of the subject, as you will encounter them subsequently, at which time I shall elaborate upon them at greater length. I would propose that, upon concluding this series of lessons, you revisit this particular lesson and review it meticulously a second time. You will possess a significantly more distinct conception of the subject then, and many concepts which currently seem more or less nebulous and unsatisfactory will manifest as lucid and comprehensible. In swaying individuals whom we encounter vis-a-vis, we impact them in a manifold number of ways, which may be summarily categorized into three modes: by direct suggestion through the voice, demeanor, countenance, and eye. This encompasses not merely voluntary suggestions on our part, but also the suggestions conveyed involuntarily by every fervent individual. By mental undulations directed toward the other person by a voluntary exertion of our intellect. By the adductive quality of thought, resulting from the process of disciplined thought, to which I alluded in the preceding lesson. This force, once engendered, operates involuntarily and comprises the most arresting phase of what we term personal magnetism. In this lesson, I shall restrict myself to the first mentioned form of personal influence, and I will address the succeeding forms in subsequent lessons. It is a most formidable undertaking to impart an intelligible, comprehensive concept of the subject of suggestion within the limited space at my disposal. If the student has familiarized himself with the principles underpinning hypnotism or hypnotic suggestion, he will readily comprehend precisely what I intend when I employ the term suggestion. To those who lack this advantage, I will state that a suggestion is an impression, consciously or unconsciously received through any of our sensory faculties. We are perpetually accepting or rejecting suggestions, the acceptance or rejection being contingent upon the degree of suggestibility within ourselves, said degree being engendered by the development or cultivation of the non-receptive qualities of the mind. We cannot attempt to delve profoundly into the subject of what is known as the dual mind in man, which has been variously designated as the objective and subjective minds, the voluntary and involuntary minds, the conscious and subconscious minds, etc. Should the student be desirous of acquainting himself fully with this subject, I would suggest that he procure a reputable treatise on hypnotism or hypnotic suggestion. There are several exemplary volumes on this subject, yet I would recommend the occult books published by the Library Shelf, known as Series A, B, C, and D, which are courses of instruction in the basic principles of personal magnetism, hypnotism, suggestion, and kindred branches of psychic research. In order that the student may grasp the concept that I wish to convey regarding the employment of suggestion as a means of exerting personal influence, I would have him understand that the mind possesses two general functions, which, adhering to the terminology employed by me in my other writings, are known as the active function and the passive function, respectively. The active function performs the voluntary volitional ratiocination and also manifests what we term will power. It is the function employed frequently by the dynamic, energetic, vigorous, alert individual in his moments of industry. The passive function executes the instinctive, automatic, involuntary cognition, exhibiting no volition and manifesting on lines diametrically opposed to the active function. The passive function is an invaluable servitor of man, and indeed performs the preponderance of his mental labor, executing all the drudgery and fulfilling its allotted assignment without receiving praise or gratitude. It labors without complaint and ostensibly without exertion, and never appears to fatigue. The active function, on the other hand, operates solely at the instigation of the will, and consumes a greater quantity of nervous energy than its passive brother. It undertakes the strenuous, active work of the mind, and fatigues after substantial effort, clamoring for repose. You are cognizant of a degree of exertion when you employ the active function, but this is not the case when you utilize the genial, faithful, complaisant passive function. I trust that you comprehend the distinguishing characteristics of these two functions from this succinct elucidation. Certain individuals conduct nearly all their cognition via passive modalities. Such persons deem it too onerous a burden to perform their own thinking, and prefer the prefabricated cogitation of others in lieu of their own production. They are practically human sheep. They are exceedingly credulous and will accept nearly any assertion made to them in an earnest, positive manner. These individuals are highly suggestible and are virtually at the mercy of those possessing a more active intellect. They find it arduous to articulate a refusal, and are inclined to acquiesce if it is more facile and requires less cerebration. Others are not quite so susceptible, and some are scarcely suggestible at all, intermittently. However, the latter, upon relaxing and according their active functions a respite, are significantly more susceptible than at other times. To facilitate the formation of a mental image of the two functions, for the purpose of executing the instructions provided in this course, I will request that you envision a pair of twins who are associated as confederates in a business enterprise. They appear physically identical, yet possess very divergent attributes, and each is eminently suited for the performance of the special duties which he has undertaken. They partake equally in the profits and losses of the business. The passive brother attends to the receipt of merchandise, the fulfillment of orders, the packing of goods, the maintenance of inventory, etc., while the active brother attends to the vending of wares, the general management of affairs, financiering, the advancement of operations, and, in short, is the executive of the concern and its dynamic spirit. Regarding the procurement of wares, however, both brothers participate. The passive brother is a genial, complaisant, exceedingly malleable sort of fellow, a plodding, automatic, mechanical type of individual. He is somewhat entrenched in his notions, rather superstitious and dogmatic, yet exceedingly credulous and apt to credit almost anything one may tell him, providing the novel statement does not directly conflict with some of his preconceived notions. To introduce a radically novel concept into his mind, it is necessary to insinuate it into him by degrees. He is accustomed to deferring to the opinions of his brother when the latter is present, and, in his brother's absence, to the opinions of other people. He will be prone to grant you any favor or provide almost anything you request, providing you proffer the request in a firm, confident manner. He is apprehensive of offending your sensibilities by a refusal, and will promise you anything to disencumber himself of your presence, and to avoid issuing a definitive refusal. You can persuade him to purchase almost anything if his brother is not supervising him, provided you approach the matter correctly. All you must do is assume a bold, confident facade, and presume matters as settled. You are acquainted with the archetype. The active brother, however, is a distinct species of individual. He is a suspicious, vigilant, alert, obdurate sort of individual. He entertains no frivolity. He deems it necessary to maintain a strict surveillance over his passive brother, so that the interests of the firm do not suffer. The passive brother is perpetually susceptible to entrapment or impasse, necessitating a custodian of sorts. Should the active associate momentarily succumb to slumber or become too engrossed in his labors to maintain vigilance over the passive brother, misfortune is destined to befall the latter. Consequently, the active partner displays little inclination to permit you to meet the passive brother until he has grown thoroughly acquainted with your character, or is satisfied that you harbor no predatory designs upon his malleable associate. He scrutinizes you with care, inquires into your affairs, and endeavors to ascertain your true intent before granting access to the alternate partner. Should he surmise that you harbor schemes against the impressionable fellow, he will inform you that his amenable brother is absent, and so forth. Even were he to permit an audience with his brother, he will observe every movement and attend to every syllable. In the event he surmises you are attempting to practice some deception upon the credulous man, he will authoritatively suppress the scheme and terminate the negotiation. He deliberates upon every proposition, accepting it if it proves rational, or rejecting it should it lack merit. His suspicion diminishes as he becomes acclimated to your presence, and he may eventually develop considerable confidence in your integrity. Furthermore, he may be entertained and diverted, during which intervals he relaxes his vigilance and becomes less mistrustful. If his suspicions are once assuaged, you may succeed in exchanging a word with the other brother, in which instance you have achieved a significant advancement. For the amenable brother, once acquainted with you, will himself contrive to facilitate the subsequent encounter. He suffers from loneliness and chafes under the restraint imposed upon him by his brother. Having once made your acquaintance, he will remain alert for another opportunity to converse with you. The initial step is invariably the most arduous. Pray remember that the psychology of every man or woman constitutes a partnership, composed of functions represented by the two characters with whom I have just endeavored to acquaint you. There exists, however, a variance among these firms. The passive partner remains substantially consistent in all instances, although in some he contrives to assert his will more frequently, while in others he is relegated further to the background, this discrepancy being caused by the degree of positiveness inherent in the active partner. There exists a profound disparity among these active partners. Some stand as splendid exemplars of prudence, vigilance, and sagacity, whilst others possess these qualities to a lesser degree, and some are nearly as tractable as their passive brethren. Some may be coerced, others cajoled, others flattered, and others wearied until they relax their vigilance. Some become so engrossed in a subject that they fail to observe the visitor becoming well acquainted with the passive brother, and may even permit him to authorize a requisition for goods. Each possesses his own idiosyncrasies, his particular vulnerabilities. As a man is no stronger than his weakest point, the obvious precept is to identify that vulnerability and direct the assault precisely there. You will readily perceive that the paramount objective is to elude the vigilance of the active partner. There exist manifold methods of achieving this. The imperative is to ascertain the most efficacious route. Should one avenue prove ineffectual, attempt another. If you persist in your endeavors, you will eventually triumph. Faint heart never won fair lady. It can be accomplished if approached with propriety and skill. It is executed daily. It is facile with some and arduous with others, yet it can be achieved with all of these watchful partners provided you persist with unyielding determination. Never accept a refusal as final. Pursue the same strategy in commerce that you would employ were you courting the woman you loved. In the latter instance, a refusal or two or a dozen, for that matter, would be of no consequence. Employ the identical tactics in your professional affairs, and you shall carry the day. Fortune is feminine, you are aware, and possesses all the characteristics attributed to that sex. Suggestions acquire potency through repetition. A man may reject a proposition when initially presented, yet upon hearing the same assertion repeatedly, he will eventually come to credit it. It is little wonder, for you believe it yourself from mere reiteration, and why should he prove an exception? Moreover, a suggestion may produce no apparent effect at the moment of its delivery, but may resemble a seed planted in fertile soil, which will have germinated by the time you return. By conversing appropriately with the active partner and engaging his interest, you enable the passive brother, actuated by a curiosity of which he possesses a full share, to draw near and overhear your discourse. He will often contemplate the overheard words after your departure, and upon your subsequent visit, he will contrive to secure an interview with you, notwithstanding the interference of his stern brother. Love laughs at locksmiths, and so, on occasion, does the passive fellow at his brother. You should retain the aforementioned mental image regarding the dual functions of the mind, the active partner and his passive brother. With this imagery fixed in your intellect, you will be capable of directing your suggestions to the greatest advantage, and also of guarding yourself against the suggestions of others. In influencing a man with whom you come into personal contact, you need not depend entirely upon the power of suggestion to surmount the watchfulness of the active partner of his mind. You will be aided by two powerful allies: direct thought waves consciously projected by your intellect, and the involuntary adductive qualities of thought. These powers may be highly developed through the exercises that shall be provided to you during this course of lessons. You will also learn to acquire characteristics calculated to aid you in making a favorable impression upon the active brother, who is apt to be influenced by external appearances. There remains one essential element you must master, however, and that is confidence, alongside a conviction in your ability to command this subject. It is analogous to a youth learning to swim. The capacity for natation is inherent in every boy, yet he does not credit it. As soon as he believes that he can swim, he swims. But so long as he believes he cannot, he remains unable. He may improve in the art of swimming through practice, but he possessed the inherent power from the beginning, and all he required was belief. You possess within you the art of influencing others, but until you believe it and possess confidence, you will find the endeavor arduous. You are capable of achieving it and have but to strike out. You may commence with elementary exercises at first, but you must maintain confidence from the outset. Some men discover this by happenstance and remain ignorant of the reason for their success. You are now cognizant of the reason and can perform as well as or better than the man who has merely stumbled upon the truth. Chapter 5. Personal Habits and Social Etiquette. In the antecedent lesson, I analogized the dual functions of the individual mind to two fraternal associates participating in a commercial enterprise. For the sake of expository clarity, I shall sustain this illustration, as it remains strictly applicable to the actual state of affairs. This active partner is a particularly exacting gentleman who requires considerable indulgence and meticulous handling. He is influenced to an appreciable degree by conversation, appearance, demeanor, vocal tone, the gaze, etc. Furthermore, while each active partner possesses distinct predilections and idiosyncrasies, there exist specific traits common to them all. Regarding conversation, we must, if feasible, ascertain what subjects engage the interest of this venerable individual. If you gratify him in this regard, he is prone to neglect his duties as the guardian of his more complaisant brother. You must, therefore, learn to discourse upon matters in which he is interested, yet avoid the error of excessive verbosity. Afford the gentleman an opportunity to speak. You should converse only until you have successfully initiated him upon a favorite topic, and subsequently maintain silence. You ought to cultivate the art of listening, for it constitutes one of the most valuable accomplishments in the world. Many a gentleman or lady has ascended to an exalted station simply by virtue of being an adept listener. You may recall the well-known anecdote regarding Thomas Carlyle. A visitor once called upon him, and being a skilled listener as well as a student of human nature, contrived to initiate him into speaking upon a favorite subject. Carlyle discoursed for exceeding 3 hours without affording the visitor an opportunity to interject a single word. When the caller finally rose to depart, Carlyle accompanied him to the threshold in a surprisingly genial humor and bade him farewell, stating, "Come again, Mon. We have enjoyed a most delightful conversation. Do you perceive the objective? Listen attentively to the old active partner and behave as though each of his words were a lustrous golden dollar, newly issued from the mint. Yet, do not succumb to the influence of his spell. Devote earnest attention to his utterances, but do not permit his thoughts to produce any genuine impression upon you, lest he succeed in vending goods to your passive partner. Maintain yourself in a positive rather than negative state, for you shall have a word to address to the complaisant brother after the old gentleman becomes intoxicated with the exuberance of his own verbosity and relaxes his vigilance. By all means, cultivate the art of intelligent listening. Regarding appearance, I would counsel you to avoid the respective extremes of ostentation and dowdiness. Adhere strictly to the middle course. You should particularly eschew attire calculated to solicit exceptional attention, whether through extreme styling or the reverse. The apparel should be simple, neat, and immaculate. Do not wear a dilapidated hat or footwear, for these articles are especially conspicuous. A gentleman possessing a superior hat and neat, polished shoes may pass muster even with well-worn garments, provided they are clean, whereas with a shabby hat or soiled footwear, the effect of even an exquisite suit of clothes is nullified. Always wear fresh linen. These details are of consequence. Eschew the use of potent perfumes. To the majority of men, strong fragrances are an abomination. It is scarcely necessary to add that personal cleanliness is a vital prerequisite for securing a favorable hearing with the majority of active partners, notwithstanding that they may not be so fastidious themselves. Your demeanor should be pleasant and cheerful, yet not frivolous. A certain degree of reserve is desirable. Your temper, naturally, should be thoroughly under control. Anger is an indication of weakness, not strength, and the angry individual is invariably placed at a disadvantage. You must be absolutely fearless, both physically and morally, the latter constituting the rarer quality. If you are irascible or prone to yield to a fear of misfortune, anxiety, etc., you should devote specific attention to the lesson on character building and rectify these deficiencies. Your manner should convey the concept of self-respect, yet should likewise demonstrate a delicate consideration for the sentiments, preferences, and aversions of others. If you lack the latter quality, you must cultivate it by all means, as it is of paramount importance in cultivating friendships and securing the favor of active partners, the latter being merely human despite their rugged exteriors. If you will bear in your mind this sentiment, I act toward you as I would desire you to act toward me, and compel the thought to take form in action, you will acquire this valuable quality. Cultivate a candid, open demeanor. Most individuals appreciate such a disposition. Be earnest when you converse. It not only captures the attention of the individuals to whom you are speaking, but also serves as a valuable aid in securing the acceptance of your suggestions. Moreover, it is a significant factor in imparting force to your thought vibrations. Cultivate a firm, honest, and virile handshake. No one enjoys having a flaccid, limp hand thrust upon him. You do not, yourself, do not overlook this. If you do not possess the proper handshake, commence the effort to acquire it immediately. Clasp hands with everyone as if he were the millionaire father of your beloved. Furthermore, look individuals directly in the eye. I shall have more to articulate regarding the power of the eye in the subsequent lesson, but I wish to direct your attention to it in connection with the hearty handshake. The two are inseparable. Cultivate an agreeable vocal tone, avoiding an indistinct utterance on the one hand and a loud, boisterous intonation on the other. An excellent rule is to pitch the voice to the tone of the party with whom you are conversing, provided always that you do not shout in order to keep pace with the other person. If the other gentleman shouts, maintain your own voice even and subdued, and he will soon descend to your pitch. This, incidentally, is a prudent strategy to adopt with a person who is agitated and is attempting to administer a severe verbal castigation. In such an instance, maintain your composure and ensure that your voice is subdued and steady. You will discover the voice of the other gentleman or lady gradually descending to your pitch. As he lowers his voice, his temper subsides, he feels ashamed, and you have carried the day. Attempt this. There is profound significance in the voice. A flexible, well-modulated voice is most pleasing and secures many victories for its fortunate possessor. Let your voice express the nuance of feeling which you wish to convey. This constitutes one of the most potent forms of suggestion. An expressive voice is one of the principal instruments of the successful suggestionist. The student must not despair if he lacks certain of the important requisites for success aforementioned. He should recognize that every one of these gifts is within his reach, if he will but assume the burden to acquire it. I elucidate this point fully. Do you want access to this and all the complete audiobooks on the channel, plus the ebook version? Click the link in the description or scan the QR code in the left corner of the screen to access our library, where you can listen to your favorite esoteric books without ad interruptions, lock your screen, or use other apps while the narration plays, and even download the ebook version to follow along as you listen. Listen on your computer via web browser, or download the app from the Play Store. After subscribing, you will receive an email with your login details, password, and step-by-step instructions on how to access the books through the Hotmart app.